بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء وإمام المرسلين سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين اللهم فقهنا في الدين وعلمنا تعويل وجعلنا من خيرة أمة سيدنا محمد عليه أفضل الصلاة وتم التسليم اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. We seek Allah's protection from knowledge that does not benefit, from a heart that has no khushu, from a nafs that's never had enough, from an eye that does not tear, and from a dua that's not heard. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, everyone's well. We continue on our journey going through the Seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, the biography of the Prophet ﷺ, and lessons that we can learn. Now, what I want to start off with actually, because I was just, so one of our teachers is doing the Seerah that first session that I attended today. Unfortunately, I had to leave early because we had our session, so it's a clash with ours, so I need to try to figure out how we're going to do it. I probably need to get through my Seerah quickly so then I can attend his classes. Now, obviously, whoever you study with, so different teachers, everyone has their own unique way of doing something. Now, I don't, and I've mentioned this so many times, I don't see myself as a teacher, but I'm just presenting across the Seerah in my best ability. What I try to do is try to go into a lot of detail, etc. But then from others, you can pick up, maybe not going as much detail, but then you pick up other wisdoms from there, the spiritual aspect, etc., and all that, which is a lot more powerful, I feel. But so one of the things actually teachers mention about it, and I want to mention this, how you approach coming to Seerah classes, or listening to Seerah classes. And he goes, you have it in your mind that you're coming to see the Prophet ﷺ. Okay, we know the Prophet ﷺ is alive, and there's so much proofs on that. But the idea here is that you come to see the Prophet ﷺ. When we talk about the virtually or spiritually, etc., and that side of things, and we all have this intention, inshallah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the ziyarah, the vision of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But again, he goes, your approach in terms of when you're coming, your intentions when you are watching these classes on Seerah, is you have that in your mind, and then it kind of changes everything completely. So something I've been doing, so every lesson that I've taught, and I'll mention this, I don't think I've ever mentioned this before, but I mentioned it because our teacher mentioned it actually. So he mentioned it for the students. Obviously, I was doing it because I'm teaching the Seerah, and what I do is, before lesson, you have also, you brush your teeth, put on attar, etc., perfume, etc., and all of this, and you take this a lot from when you have the likes of Imam Malik, Imam Abu Hanifa, etc. Even when they were going through a hadith, the state they were in beforehand, what they would do, everything that they would go through. But a teacher can mention about for students, before you're attending these classes, ghusl, perfume, etc. And obviously we've got all those that for students of knowledge before attending classes, miswak. There's so much reward on this. So I just wanted to kind of mention that because it came from him, and I thought just pass on that information to you guys. And if it kind of, I suppose, it does truly changes the way you approach learning about the Prophet ﷺ. You approach the Seerah, approach the biography. I mean, mashallah, we've gone through a lot. And I understand, obviously, I've not been able to deliver in the best way possible, or how it should be delivered, but we have gone through a lot. And inshallah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you the ability to pick up certain aspects, and you kind of go away at the end of a lesson and say, oh, there's something new I've learned, right? Even from stuff that you already knew, There's always something that you pick up, and that's what I try to do, to present across to you. And inshallah you have felt that. I mean, we are coming to the end now of the Seerah, but there was something that he just mentioned and it really kind of hit me, and I thought it would be important to share across to you guys. So this intention of you coming to class, being prepared, coming to the class. I know, everyone's just staring at a screen. We used to have the classes normally, in the masjid for people to attend. Although there wasn't much of an attendance, but a lot of people were doing online. We're all busy in our lives. But the Seerah classes, we've done pretty much everything online because of COVID and etc. And then we've just continued it. But what tends to happen, especially when you are either even in live sessions or watching the classes later, people get a bit lazy. It's here, there, dressed up and however you want to dress up, maybe not paying attention, doing 3 or 4 other things. If I hear something in the background, if I pick up something, that's great. If I don't, I don't. Okay, so just kind of reaffirm your intention and what you're going to get from it, and inshallah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you, all of us to truly benefit from the Seerah, whatever little we have come across, and then pass it on to others as well. I think this is important. So passing on this information to others, being prepared, because we are in a challenging world where you'll be, the Prophet ﷺ is attacked in so many different ways. So it's important for us to know about the Prophet ﷺ and defend it in this way, in terms of through knowledge. I think this is really important. So I just wanted to share that, inshallah, before we continue. Okay, so last week we spoke about after the conquest of Makkah, and we spoke about some of the conversions. We spoke about kind of some of the famous hadiths as well. We spoke about the Prophet ﷺ talking about certain rulings that came about after the conquest of Makkah that we take from, famous hadith of the Prophet ﷺ reprimanding Usama, where you had this lady that was going to get punished, and she was from like a high tribe, like a privileged tribe, and he said, look, he goes, surely do you want me to, you're going to turn around and speak for her or try to defend her when she's done something wrong? And then you have those famous words that the Prophet ﷺ said, even if my daughter, Sayyidah Fatima, she did something wrong, I'd punish her as well. Okay, so setting these standards for all of us, and look at it how we should be implementing that in our lives or in the justice system. But unfortunately we failed a lot. Anyway, so what happens now then is, to the east of Makkah, like the great kind of inland tribes of Hawazin and Bani Taqif. Remember when the Prophet ﷺ initially was coming to Makkah, the intention of conquest of Makkah, although those in Makkah did not, and this was one of the miracles, right until the fact that the Prophet ﷺ was on their doorstep with 10,000, they were not aware that he was coming to conquer Makkah. But word got around elsewhere, and one of those places was Taif. So you got to bear in mind that the Prophet ﷺ stays now in Makkah after the conquest of Makkah, according to the Bukhari, 19 days. So let's even stick to 19 days. And then the travel from Medina, the word had got to Taif beforehand. So they've had a lot of time to prepare. So they've had about a month to prepare. So they had it in their mind that, and there was word going around that the Prophet ﷺ is actually coming to Taif, to attack Taif. So they kind of assembled the troops, okay, in case the Prophet ﷺ, the planned attack on Taif. This is what they were thinking. So they had assembled their troops, okay. And after the conquest of Makkah and the destruction of the temple of Al-Uzza, the kind of the Hawazin and the Taqif clans urgently, they increased their forces to 20,000. So you can say that the Hawazin and Taqif themselves made up about 10,000, and then what they did is they went all around the surrounding Arabs. They kind of got all these, and it was the greatest or the biggest ever gathering of the Arabs. So what you find is pretty much every battle, the numbers increase. So this was the kind of largest gathering of Arabs against the Prophet ﷺ, or against the Muslims. I'd say Muslims we'll know that there was both Muslims and non-Muslims on the other side, but against the Prophet ﷺ. So that's the situation now. They've gathered this large army. Okay, so it's become, you can say, a battle of polytheism v monotheism. This is what it looks like, because they're probably thinking that, wait a minute, now the Quraysh are gone. Okay, after the Quraysh, the next, you can say, in the kind of greatest was the Bani Taqif. You know, the Hawazin were kind of around it as well. So it was almost like that was the second center. Now that the Quraysh are gone, it's a case of, look, we're the almost leaders. We need to kind of step up now. And also it's an opportunity for them to take over Makkah, because that was really the center. That's where the Kaaba is. That's where everyone wants to be. So it was like there was a lot of things at play here. Okay, there's a lot of things at play here. But that was the situation now. So what they do, they get this large, 20,000 army ready to, and remember, Taif was, so far, remember when we described Taif, we remember when the Prophet ﷺ went to Taif, and how we described what Taif was. It was almost like, you can say, for the rich, etc. They had their holiday homes there. The weather, etc. was so great. So, because the weather was great, you had the fruit, etc. and all that. There was a lot more of it. So they were well fed, armies well prepared, they were rich and all of that. So they were so much far ahead in terms of that side of things. So they get together and they're led by a 30-year-old general. His name was Malik ibn Auf. Okay, Malik ibn Auf. Now, an incident actually takes place. This is what happens with their preparation. So Malik ibn Auf, they kind of get together with the army and all that. And they kind of call an old leader, an old general that led them, an old man. And it was almost for, you can say, blessings. So they call him over, that we're preparing for this and all that, so come and give your blessing. So he came and he was blind. And he goes, I can sense the presence of women and children. And actually your animals, etc. and all that. I can sense all of this. You've brought all your wealth with you. What's going on? Your stock, etc., animal stock, whatnot. And they said, yeah, that's true. We've brought the women and children as well, and the animals and everything, all our wealth, everything's coming along with us. It's all there. And he says, who decided this? He goes, our leader, our general, Malik. He goes, call him over. Why has he done this for? So he asks him, look, why have you done this? And he goes, I want everyone to come and fight. Remember, it's similar to Abu Sufyan, etc. Well, it's not Abu Sufyan. It probably would have been Abu Sufyan. It was in the battle when everyone, they brought their families so that no one can run away. So you're going to fight till the end, because then you have to consider the fact that your wives, etc., they're all here as well. So it's along those similar lines. He said, I want people to fight to the last breath, so they don't run away, because everything's here now of theirs. So you're fighting for everything. And he said to him, that's stupid. He goes, look, the women and children aren't going to fight for you. They're not going to win the battle for you. It's the men and their swords that are going to win the battle for you. Okay. What you should have done is basically, it's a case of, if you left the women and children and your stock, etc., at the back, back home, if you win, you go back to them. If you lose, you still know that they're safe. What you've just done now is you brought them all along here. What happens when you lose? Okay, what happens when you lose? So he goes, it's stupid. He goes, what you should do is, still send them back, so they're protected there. But what Malik did was he kind of ridiculed him, mocked him. Oh, you got no idea what you're talking about. You're old now. Your time's up. I'm the general. I know what I'm doing. Okay, so he mocked him, and he's off you go. The old man actually mentions a lot of names. Before this, he mentions a lot of names of some of the kind of great fighting tribes. He goes, where's so-and-so? They go, oh, they didn't come. Where's so-and-so? They didn't come. Oh, where's so-and-so? They didn't come. So these kind of great fighting tribes decided not to join this, the Arabs here. And he said, look, they're clever. They know what they're doing. They know it's a lost cause. So he tells these guys as well. He tells Malik. He says that, you know what? Don't fight. Just go back. Because remember, it was Taif that was kind of, I suppose, inciting. They're the ones who were going to attack. Now the word was going around that it was them that were ready to fight. It wasn't a case of after the conquest of Makkah, the Prophet was looking around, okay, who's next now? The list, no. It came from Taif. So he's there saying to him, look, just go back, forget it. But he, again, like I said, he mocked him. He goes, no, off you go. We're not going to listen to you. Off you go. So what happens is, on this side, the Prophet ﷺ leads his army. He's bolstered by a further 2,000 now new Quraysh converts, as well as kind of Makkans who have not yet entered Islam. Okay, they've not yet entered Islam, so there's still a few of those as well that have not entered Islam joining. According to some narrations, it was the 6th Shawwal, and he arrives the location of 10th Shawwal. The question here is, why is it that the pagan Meccans joined the march to Hunayn? Okay, so the Prophet ﷺ was also the protector against the threatening enemy. So for them, it was self-preservation, okay, rather than hope of beauty. So it was like self-preservation, sticking with this person. He's now a new protector. Okay. What happens is that the Prophet ﷺ also asks Safwan. I remember we spoke about Safwan. Was it last week we spoke about him? I think it was last week, basically. We spoke about him, who is not still a Muslim yet. He said, look, give me some time. But he had he inherited a lot. So he had a lot of wealth. So the Prophet ﷺ says to him, look, lend the armor, etc. The army armor, etc. And he asks, oh, if I don't, will you just simply take it? So is that a request, or you demanding it from me? So it's a case, if I don't give you, will you just take it? And the Prophet ﷺ replied, no, it's kind of but a loan. Okay, anything lost will be guaranteed by me. So any damage, etc., I will replace it, or whatnot, give you money instead. And again, we get some fiqh rulings on the back of this. When you lend something to someone, they're responsible for it, and if something goes wrong, then they're responsible to fix it or replace it. So they kind of set off as well. An incident takes place on the way, actually, and it's of the tree of Dat al-Amwat. So what happens is, it was a place where the polytheists used superstitiously. They used to hang their swords and sleep beneath before battle. So they would just hang their swords up there and sleep beneath it, before the battle. And they had the view that this would give them good luck, and they will win the battles on the back of this. And remember, in the army now, not only do you have a lot of new converts, okay, but also some non-Muslims as well. So you still have that fresh in the mind. They don't have that tarbiyah, etc., that the Prophet ﷺ has been given to the rest. And they asked the Prophet ﷺ for permission to do the same, or even like create another tree like that for us. And he says, look, this is a habit of people who have no religion. You ask me as the people of Moses asked him to make for them an idol to worship. Okay? And, make for them an idol to worship. Remember, it was the same kind of scenario here. So he gave that as an example to them. Right? Kind of reprimanding them that, get out of your jahiliyyah ways, ignorant ways. Okay, so that was an incident that took place on the way to the battle. Now what happened is that Thaqif and Hawazin, among others, they reached the battlefield first, okay, and they know the place, they know the area. What I was trying to do is research on the actual location, and it's a bit confusing because there's a few places that have been pictured out, and also even on Google, when you Google Maps, there's actually 2 locations that are mentioned as this is the Battle of Hunayn. So I probably need to look into a bit more to try to understand exactly which one is, because I don't want to just turn around and start sharing it and say this is it, but it's something else. So I wanted to kind of share some images for you to get an understanding of it, because that next part is important of what these guys try to do. Right? So they kind of conceal themselves in the kind of rocky crags above the battlefield. Okay, And from like a valley north of Taif, Malik sends several scouts to assess the Prophet ﷺ's position. So, and each of these kind of scouts return, and they're kind of more terrified than the next. And they warn, this young general of theirs to withdraw, just go back, forget it. And they're shaken and they're afraid. They said, you're not fighting people of earth. Okay, you're not fighting people of earth, but of heaven. Some reported to have seeing terrifying men in white clothes, in the vanguard. But Malik mocks them. He mocks his scouts for their cowardice, and orders the entire army to march to the valley of Hunayn, where he can ambush the Prophet ﷺ's troops. He actually, first after mocking, he says, show me a man of courage. He's trying to think, look, these scouts, they're just scared anyway. Tell me someone who's got, someone who's courageous. Okay, so show me a man of courage. So they send another man out who claims, who's meant to be a man of courage, but he comes back as well in the same state, having seen the same terrifying horseman. But again, he still ignores it. He doesn't listen, and he instructs them to head to the valley of Hunayn after dark. Because what he knows is that the Muslims will have to pass through this particular section. And this is why I was trying to identify, because I've come across that you can still see the valley up to this point, so it's like a passway through, and that was the main plan of the people of Taif. This was their main plan, how to trap and the General Malik, and how to trap the Muslims. So as the Prophet ﷺ's men, so what happens is, the idea here is that they're going to enter. So Malik, the way was that the Muslims are going to enter this valley. He was going to place people, like a small group of his army, place them there to almost lower the Muslims into this area. So head towards them. And then there'll be a bit of fighting, and then this army will rush back. This will then get the rest of them to follow suit and actually join the valley. And then he will have all these archers at the top who can then start fighting away. And then the rest of the army can then attack them. All right. So it was all like an ambush, and actually it worked. It worked to the letter. This is exactly what happened. So the Prophet ﷺ's men enter the valley. Malik's unseen forces descend from the surrounding finds. At first the Hawazin, etc., their forces they overwhelm Sayyidina Khalid's battalion. So the chaos takes place. The Prophet ﷺ men, but they're taken by surprise. Okay, they're taken by surprise, and the Muslims begin to scatter. You have the likes of Abu Sufyan, who was next to the Prophet ﷺ, his cousin Abu Sufyan, and actually you had some of the Sayyidina Abu Bakr, Sayyidina Umar, Sayyidina Uthman, Sayyidina Ali, his core people around him. And the Prophet ﷺ makes the order to attack. And soon as it's described in Surah Tawbah, the momentum shifts back. And I'll mention the ayahs, and then we'll talk a bit more about it. So in Surah Tawbah, verses 25 to 26, so God has already helped you on many fields, and on the day of Hunayn. So this is when Hunayn is actually mentioned, one of I think 3 battles that are mentioned, Badr and Ahzab, the other that's mentioned, when your multitude was pleasing to you. So actually what happens is that as they're traveling, there's somewhat pride in some of the people, because again, new Muslims, whatnot, and they see, you've got 12,000 strong army, and actually it's the most armory, etc., that they've had when traveling. They've never had something like this, although it's still not as well as the others, but they still had it. So 12,000 strong. So they thought, wait a minute, we've won with, these battles have been won with far less people. 12,000, they were full on confident, and this is when it's mentioned here as well. But your multitude is pleasing to you, but it availed you nothing, and the earth, for all its vastness, was too narrow for you. And so, the descriptions given of what's happening, and you turned your back, and retreating. And the next ayah says, then God sent down His gift of inner peace and reassurance on His messenger and the believers, and sent to your aid hosts that you did not see, and punished those who disbelieved. Such is the recompense of unbelievers. Okay, so they So they wait for the Muslims to be lowered in. A small group was at the other side. When they kind of scatter, more Muslims would enter, and then the archers would attack. So that was the whole plan. When all this happens and they all scattered and the people running here, running there, Safwan's brother actually, he gets happy. Safwan's brother, he gets happy. He says, good, the kind of magic spell would be broken. And then Safwan kind of responds to him. Magic spell as in the Prophet ﷺ kind of spell on everyone, because that's what they see him as, a magician, sorcery, etc., sorcerer. And Safwan says to him, oh, shut up, kind of thing. He's like, I would rather be ruled by a Qurayshi than a Hawazini. So again, now it's still that tribalism that's in their mind. So regardless of, they don't care about the religion aspect, this one, they'd rather be led by a Qurayshi than a Hawazini. Let aside the religion aspect of it. Okay, let aside the religion aspect of it. So everyone kind of scatters, but what happens? The Prophet ﷺ stands his ground. He stood there. And the Prophet, massively outnumbered, the Prophet ﷺ kind of rose in his stairs upon Al-Bayda, it's a pure white mule, and he cries out, I am the Prophet. Okay, I am the Prophet, this is no lie. I am the son of Abdul Muttalib. So see the two aspects he mentions. First of all, I am the Prophet. There is no lie. See the religious aspect for those Muslims, I'm the Prophet here. Okay, and then he kind of speaks about for those that they take such great in terms of the tribalism. He is the son of Abdul Muttalib. Abdul Muttalib before in the ignorant time, the greatest Arab. And all of this, we spoke so much about Abdul Muttalib, how highly he was regarded, Abraha, Zamzam, etc., and all of this. So it's a case, I'm the son of Abdul Muttalib. So that's the tribal aspect of it. And first of all, it's like, I'm the Prophet. To kind of encourage people to stand your ground, where you're going. Narrated Abu Ishaq, I'll just narrate the hadith. Al-Barra was asked while I was listening, did you flee before the enemy along with the Prophet ﷺ on the day of the Battle of Hunayn? He replied, as for the Prophet, he did not flee. The enemy were good archers, and the Prophet ﷺ was saying, I am the Prophet ﷺ, undoubtedly. I am the son of Abdul Muttalib. Okay, so he then said, the Prophet ﷺ then made dua, oh Allah, I ask you of your promise. And then what he does is he took some stones and he flung them at the enemy. Okay, and then kind of the charge into the midst of the enemy. Basically, again, one of those miracles, he's done it previously as well, just kind of grabbing some stones or just throwing it towards the enemy, and it blinds them. So the archers then they struggle, they can't kind of fire away and all that, because that was this main aspect. This was like, you say plan A, there was no other plan, that was the plan to get them, right? What also happens is, because with the Prophet ﷺ was his uncle, Sayyidina Abbas, radiallahu anhu, and kind of he's told, because Sayyidina Abbas had a loud voice, and he's told to kind of shout out to get people together, and then what he does is he starts calling people by name, as in like calling the tribes by their name. Oh, people of the tree, okay? Oh, people of the oath, Hudaybiyah, remember all of this. He's like bringing them about, the companions then start replying, Labbaik, and come rushing back. And this is how then everyone regroups. So the Prophet ﷺ comes out with, his, and then Sayyidina Abbas with his loud voices, he's shouting out and calling all these people, as in, where you're going, when you shout out by your name, like, imagine this, the people of Hudaybiyah, how much is mentioned about them, how great they were. Oh, people of the tree, oh, people of the oath. It's like, where are you going? And then they respond back, Labbaik, and then they're all getting together, and this is how they group together. Okay? This is how they rush back and they group together. For no reason other than this. Just because of this, they just got back together, and the tide just suddenly changes. And then obviously you got the aspect of the Prophet ﷺ, and he flung all the kind of little stones, etc., almost like another miracle of his that temporarily kind of, I suppose, blinds the archers, etc., gives them some respite. And just for this reason, then the tide suddenly and unexpectedly turns, and kind of the Hawazin and the Taif, they are rooted. Okay, they flee in all directions, leaving behind their women, children, and livestock. With the main body returning to the mountain city of Taif. Okay, they later note, the presence of angelic forces. There's all these descriptions given. There was these angels helping them, etc. So all of these descriptions I've given. So this is kind of how things just kind of almost changed. So from one side of things, remember this was from the people of Taif. This was their battle plan. They did not have a plan B. Ambush them, that's it, and it was working. So like I said, the Prophet ﷺ then stood up and kind of got them back together, as in grouped them back together. And then when they were grouped back together, and then they charge, that's it. It was game over for this side. So we'll finish off on actually just the description of Martin Lings that he gives. And we'll speak about actually, because there's certain important incidents that take place after the Battle of Hudaybiyah. There's one thing actually I want to mention before this, that a few incidents happened here then. You remember we just mentioned about the brother of Safwan and how he was happy, and I suppose others as well. But also there was an incident actually, and if I remember, actually I'll have to check up the name of the companions. In all of this kind of, when everyone was scattering, etc., the Prophet ﷺ was left alone. It was around him with his main group of people, but he was pretty much left alone. And it was an opportunity. And actually it was an opportunity by one of the new converts. And his change of heart, it's an opportunity here. And I think it was probably his father was killed in Badr or something. So he thought it's an opportunity to take revenge, although he had become Muslim. And what he does is he then charges toward the Prophet ﷺ. But then he describes later how all of a sudden there's this bright light that just hits his face coming from that direction, and it blinds him. He can't see. Now at that time then the Prophet ﷺ turns around and sees what's happening, and he's coming charging, etc. And he makes dua, oh Ya Allah, remove the shaitan from his heart. And then that's when obviously he kind of comes to his senses, thinking, what am I doing? Okay? But you can imagine, look at this, a very delicate situation. How then still at that time how the people were, because it was just all new. Like, they're humans in the day. They're humans. Okay. So description of by Martin Lings: the Prophet encamped that night not far from the other end of the valley, and having prayed the dawn prayer with his men, he exhorted them and gave them good tidings of victory. If they were steadfast, the sky was overcast, so that it was still almost dark as they descended into the valley bed. Khalid was in the van as before, commanding Sulaim and others. Next came the Muslim part of the new Meccan contingent. The Prophet ﷺ, mounted on Duldul, was this time in the midst of the army, with the same squadron of immigrants and helpers, so the Muhajir and the Ansar, but surrounded by more members of his own family than ever before, including his cousin Abu Sufyan. And this is the Abu Sufyan ibn Harith that we spoke about, who had just kind of come at the end and converted, not the what you call the kind of main Abu Sufyan. And Abdullah, who had joined him on his way to Mecca, and the two eldest sons of Abbas, Fadl and Qitam, and the two sons of Abu Lahab. In the rear of the army were those of the Meccans who had not yet entered Islam. The van had almost finished its descent when, in the half-light, the stationary host of Hawazin loomed into view above them on the opposite slope. It was a formidable spectacle, the more so because in the rear of the army itself there were thousands of camels unmounted. This is going to be quite interesting actually, because the fact that they've brought all their wealth with them, everything's there now, and we'll describe some of the numbers, of the staggering numbers, and we'll describe that next week actually. So when we talk about war booty, and the numbers were just staggering. And in the thousands of camels unmounted or mounted by women, and in the dimness of dawn they appeared to be part of the army itself. The road was cleared, barred in that direction, but before any new instructions could be sought or any new order given, Malik gave his signal. The squadrons of Hawazin suddenly wheeled out of the ravines and swept down upon Khalid and his men. The onslaught was so fierce and so sudden that he could do nothing to rally the Bani Sulaim, who made little or no resistance, but turned and fled headlong, scattering the ranks of the Meccans who were behind them and who now followed them in flight upon the slope that they had just descended. The terrible stampede of horses and camels choked the defile in its narrowest parts, but the Prophet ﷺ was at a point where he could withdraw a little to his right, and he now made a firm stand at the side of the road with a small body of those who had been riding near him. Sayyidina Abu Bakr, Sayyidina Umar and others of the Muhajir, some of the helpers Ansar and all the men of his family who were present. Harith's sons Abu Sufyan stood beside him and took hold of the ring of Duldul's bridle. The Prophet ﷺ called for others to join him, but his words were drowned by the din of battle. So he turned to Abbas, who had a voice of exceptional power, and told him to shout, "O companions of the tree, O companions of Asasia." Immediately the summons was answered from all sides, "Labbaik, here at thy service." As helpers, immigrants rallied to him. He soon had with him 100 men, and spreading out across the defile, they momentarily checked the onslaught of the enemy. Abbas continued to shout, and many of those who had fled now returned to the fight. The Prophet stood up in his stirrups, the better to be seen and the better to see. The enemy were preparing a fresh onslaught, and he prayed, "O God, I ask of thee that you have promised." Then he told his foster brother to give him some pebbles, and taking them in his hand, he flung them in the face of the enemy as he had done at Badr. The tide of the battle suddenly turned for no apparent reason, or rather it was not apparent to the believers, but it was apparent to the enemy, as it had been previously through their scouts. And afterwards there came the revelation, and obviously we just spoke about the revelation. Okay, so that's the description given by Martin Lings. There was also actually an incident where a woman was killed. And when the Prophet ﷺ came across, he asked, "Who did this?" And I think that they mentioned it was Sayyidina Khalid, and because he was kind of sent off on a mission, he told him to come back. And this is where you get the narrations of the fact that women and children should not be harmed in battle, in war. So it's a case of, regardless of the fact that so it's a case of women, children, elderly or servants, those that are not fighting, those you would say people around, if they're not fighting, then they should not be harmed. Okay, it's not a case of go blazing and just attack everyone. And again, you get a lot of these famous narrations on the back of that. Okay, so this is the Battle of Hunayn. How things, there's not much description. Like with others, you get this description of this. There was not much description that we get of actual incidents, but it's just how all of a sudden, from the kind of the cry of the Prophet ﷺ, standing up and getting everyone to group together, and then they just group together and then they attack, and how then things just change. It's kind of a momentum. When you talk about, it's 20,000 v 12,000, how can it all happen? When the momentum shifts, so just as when you came with the Muslims, or from the Prophet ﷺ side, when Arabs are coming down on you, and remember a lot of these, all of those coming from Mecca, not all of them would have the armor, okay, put a helmet, etc., to protect them, okay, excuse me. So then there would be this panic, when arrows are just flying all over, you can't protect yourself from it. So there's a shield, etc., because they're coming so fast. So there would be this panic came from the Muslims, and they started scattering, and it was almost like the battle is over. But because then the Prophet ﷺ regroups them, and then they go back and attack them, then it's on the opposite side thinking, "Oh, wait a minute, what do we do now?" That was our plan. Our plans fell. There was no plan B. Hence, then they would just panic then, and a lot of them just fled, and the battle was over. Okay, the battle was over. So inshallah, we leave it at that. Next week, we're going to speak about what actually happens after the battle. Interesting, because you've got all these women and children. You've got so much wealth there, right? And actually, we still got people who have fled towards Taif and all that. So we'll touch upon that as well, inshallah, speak about after the Battle of Hunayn. If possible, I'm going to try to, like I said, there seems to be, it's a case of in Battle of Hunayn, everyone kind of has their own images, but I want to kind of do a bit more research on the back of it. If I'm convinced, then I will be sharing some pictures, but if I'm not convinced myself, I'd rather not share it and put it across to you. giving some misinformation. Okay, we leave it at that until next time, inshallah. Wa sallallahu sayyidina Mawlana Muhammad wa alihi wa sallam wa salli alayhi subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al-mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.